Hello, this is Father Eli, and I'm going to give you a quick update on where we are with the building project. So I'm just going to walk you through some slides here. First of all, I want to talk about the phases. Hopefully you understand that there are going to be two phases at least at this point. The first phase would include the church, the gathering space, the social hall, the kitchen, and any site planning that would be needed as part of the project, the roads, the septic system, etc., all those kinds of things. Phase 2 would include the parish office, the education rooms, the rectory, the maintenance building. All of that would be part of the second phase, which would entail a second capital campaign down the road at some point. So just quick overview, back in the day when we had the study being done, the feasibility study in the winter of 2020, we had some estimated costs, and these are the costs that we've been kind of working off of. So at that time, with the whole project, the total was 9.3 to 10.5 million. So then we broke it into two phases, and the two things in red there are what we decided to do in the first phase. So that would be the church, social hall, kitchen, and gathering space. Okay, so we did some updates as part of that, and we updated the costs, and that got us to, instead of 5.8 to 6.7, if you did the math on the other slide, now we are at 7.7 million for the first phase of the project. That's what we've been working with as a goal. Now that doesn't include the soft costs, and the soft costs would be in addition to the 7.7 million. So anywhere from 3/4 to another million in soft costs are likely for this phase of the project. Those were all estimated on square footage numbers. As a parish, now I want to talk about some of the money that we've raised. I think it's been a little confusing when we use those numbers. So as a parish, we have set aside $1.25 million from our savings towards the project. Now, if you subtract that from the $7.7 million goal, you get $6.45 million that we need to raise. Commitments are what people have said that they will pay over a 3-year period. So a person may say, I'm going to pay X amount of dollars over 3 years. And so we asked all the parishioners to contribute. And what we got from that was another $3.86 million in commitments that parishioners and visitors have made. That if you add that to our 1.25, you get what we're projected to get after 3 years. So we've collected money of 1.36 million from that first year of commitments. So we're ahead of our curve actually. So quick rundown here, the $7.7 million has been our goal. The best of our knowledge from that time when we had an estimation of what the project would cost based on square footage. We had 1.25 million set aside from our parish funds. We have raised 3.86 million in commitments, and people have already contributed towards fulfilling those commitments 1.36. So after 3 years, we should have $5.11 million in hand. So that's good. Now the downside is we still have 2.59 million in outstanding money that we would need to raise to get to our $7.7 million goal. So that's just something to be aware of. Here's a graphic that kind of explains that. So the blue is what we have in hand. The green is what we need to get to our 5.1. So those are the additional funds that should be coming in from people's commitments. And then the yellow is what we have yet to raise in commitments. We would, even after the 3-year commitments are fulfilled, we'd still have that yellow chunk to make up, which is 2.59 million. Timeline. Let's talk about timeline. Some people have been asking, when can we start building? We need to have 75% of the project costs in hand, money in hand to start. So if you look at the numbers, we would need to have let's go back. We need to have 5.775, call it 5.8 in finances in hand to go forward. And we're not projected to make that much after 3 years. We're actually going to be at 5.11. So we have to do a little bit of math to get to where we need to be. So here's a graphic that kind of describes how we get to 5.1 million. So we started with 1.25. If you look at the bottom there, if you add 1.28 million, which is what, if you cut our commitments in thirds, that's what we should be collecting after each year. So we're ahead of the curve right now, but if you average it all out, that's where we would be. So by the summer of 2025, we should be at our $5.1 million from commitments and parish savings. Now, there's a few different ways we can try to get to our goal, but first the things to be aware of, we're trying to get a better sense of what our numbers actually are. So costs going up and so forth, we need to get bids on what is it actually going to cost us, because we can have our goal of 7.7, but what is a contractor actually willing to pay, or willing to be paid to do this project. So we're trying to do some schematic plans, which go from a concept to more of a biddable product there, so they can really see what are we asking them to do. So we're working on that right now with our architect. So if we look at the overall project and try to figure out how can we pay for this, there's a couple ways we can try to get to that 75% so that we can start putting shovels in the ground. One is we could reduce the cost, try to make it a smaller project by reducing costs in different places in different ways. So for instance, if we went down to a $7 million project, 75% of that would be 5.25, which is, we're pretty close to that already. Or we could raise new commitments and further funds to get to 75% of that $7.7 million goal. So if we want to build in 2024, which would be 2 years into our 3-year commitment, we have some work to do to get 75% of that cash in hand. Here's a little chart that shows the math of that. So you can see the higher the project is, the higher the goal would be for 75%. You can see green is where we are currently. If we move down to orange, the math is a little easier. We are closer to our target already. Now, what about that extra 25%? You might be asking. Well, that's a good question. We would have to take out some kind of loan or mortgage to pay that off. So if we get 75%, we still have to pay that 25% in the end, and that for a $2 million mortgage to pay off in 10 years, right now the rough number that a bank gave me was the payment would be $23,000 per month. So that's a pretty big chunk of change. I don't think we could afford that as a monthly mortgage payment. So that's just something to keep in mind. Here's a little graph that shows the parish participation. So we have 3 groups really that people fall into. The red is people who have already said that they are going to commit and are committed to paying for the project. So 54% of our families have said yes and are already paying. That's 162 families. The green section represents those who have said neither yes nor no. That's 31%, 93 families. And then we have the blue section, which are those who have said we can't or won't contribute to the project, and that is 15% or 44 families. So out of 299 families, that's kind of the breakdown. Where things stand currently. We've hired an architect, Jesse Hopkins. We're currently working on those schematic drawings to give us a better idea of what it's actually going to cost. And this includes things that we're doing currently right now are site planning, we're doing a survey, we're doing soil testing. All of this will help us place that building and understand what the costs are there. Things to balance. We'll have $5.1 million in hand after 3 years. That's great, but it's not the 7.7. What are the actual costs going to be? You know, inflation, material costs have gone up, so that's going to affect what our dollar will buy us. And when can we build? When are we going to reach the 75% of the 7.7 or whatever it ends up being? That's something that keep in our minds as we try to plan ahead. I think the big question that we all have is, what is the actual cost going to be? So that's why we're working on this, trying to develop a better understanding of what the cost is in today's dollars. And then can we afford it? Those are the questions that we're trying to answer right now. Okay, thanks for watching. I'm sure you have other questions, but as you go forward, talk to us. We'll try to fill you in as we get better data. So again, by April, we're hoping to have the schematic drawings that our contractors can bid on to give us a better idea of what it's going to cost. We might have to make changes, or maybe we'll be just fine. We'll have to see. All right, God bless.